Are you not sure whether you actually sleep or not? Does it feel like sometimes time just skips ahead? Does it sometimes feel like you're just constantly aware of what's going on all night? You hear everything and then somehow suddenly it's morning. If this sounds familiar to you, you've experienced what we call hypersleep. And I'm really glad you're here because this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to demystify this very common experience and see how it can fade for you so that you feel that you actually sleep again. And before we jump into it, I just want to say that sometimes somebody asks about a topic and I'm like, we have a video on this, and I'm looking kind of through the content on this channel. I'm like shocked we didn't have a video on hypersleep. So anyway, very glad to be able to share this with you. It's a very common topic, very common question. And some ways that hypersleep is expressed is as follows. I'm not sure I slept. Time just skipped ahead, like I mentioned in the intro, or this one as well. Even when I quote unquote sleep, I'm constantly aware. I hear everything. Or this one, I'm half asleep. I'm never fully asleep. I'm in and out of dreams or in and out of consciousness. Finally, this one, I don't have any REM sleep or deep sleep, just a superficial sleep that I'm not sure is sleep. These are all common expressions of hypersleep. And so today we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of break down our class into three parts. We're going to talk about hyperarousal, which is very, very helpful to know about, and then hypersleep, and then see how hypersleep fades. And oh, wait a minute, we have a little announcement here. Actually, this is just a video I want to make you aware of. We had a guest as a success story named Cash, and he mentioned in passing the burnt finger analogy and how helpful that was to him. And 3 people over the weekend asked me about this burnt finger. What's that about? Well, you can check out how an overactive nervous system calms. Actually, as we're reading, I see a typo here. It's supposed to be how an overactive nervous system calms. That is Insomnia Insight number 476. Although in that video, I used the example of a sunburn, but it's the exact same teaching. So check that one out if that's interesting to you. Now, if you would like to read the original newsletter where this was first described and you missed it, then no sweat. Letters to the NATO Nation, my latest book, and I believe my last book on the topic of insomnia is coming out very, very soon. And the burnt finger analogy is going to be in there. All right. So with that said, let's jump into our topic today. So hyperarousal is the first one. What is hyperarousal? Hyperarousal, I describe it as a heightened state of alertness and vigilance that is part of our safety machinery. And it is also, hyperarousal is also the break in our sleep system. So again, hyperarousal is when we're kind of extra alert, extra vigilant. We are more aware than we would be otherwise. And you can see how this is helpful when our brain interprets the situation as being threatening or that vigilance is important somehow, right? Now, I mentioned here that it's the break in our sleep system, and you may go, what's up with that? Well, what we teach a lot here is on the gas and brake model and how sleep is actually quite easy to understand. There's only really 2 things that matter in terms of our sleep experience. The gas is, or not only our sleep experience actually, but just sleep in general. Gas in our sleep system is what we call sleep drive, or some call it sleep pressure. It's basically like how much our body needs to sleep or wants to sleep at any given moment. Think of it as hunger in our eating system. Hunger sort of regulates how much we eat at any given moment, which it's an expression of how much our body wants to eat at any given second is hunger. So you can think of sleep drive as kind of sleep hunger. And speaking of hunger, sometimes I like to ask the question, what do you do to become hungry? And the answer is we don't need to do anything to become hungry except not eat. The longer we go without eating, the hungrier we become. And similarly, the longer we go without sleeping, the longer we go awake, the more this sleep hunger, the sleep drive builds by itself automatically in our body. The only thing that can make that sleep drive grow in the entire universe is really wakefulness. So that's sleep drive. Sleep drive is a requirement for sleep. If our body doesn't want to sleep, if we just woken up and it doesn't perceive any need for sleep, sleep will not happen. So that's the drive, that's the gas in our sleep system. And you can think of, this model is really, it started as a model for kind of how a car operates. There's a gas and brake, right? So if you imagine that car again, the gas in our sleep system, if you think our sleep system as a car, is sleep drive. Now there's a brake there too, just as in a car. You need a brake. You need some safety in the sleep system as well, because we don't want to sleep when we are in some type of danger. Nobody wants to fall asleep as a fire alarm goes off, etc. Right? So when we are in some type of dangerous situation, that hyperarousal is produced in our body, like we just talked about. And that hyperarousal is the break in our sleep system. Hyperarousal keeps us from sleeping when our brain thinks that it's not a good time to sleep. So this is the gas and brake model. So knowing this, you can see that there's kind of like 4 scenarios. One is that we have, let's say, no gas, no brake. Our body doesn't need any sleep, so there's no gas, and we're also not hyperaroused. There's no perceived danger. But if we go to bed in this kind of no gas, no brake situation, what will happen is we'll be resting comfortably. We won't sleep because there's no gas, but we won't feel, bothered by anything in particular. There's no hyperarousal. We feel peace of mind, right? So let's say, so this is like no gas, no brake scenario. Then we can have, let's say, no gas, but brake scenario. And this is somehow where we did sleep. So we don't really have any sleep drive. But we're hyper aroused. Let's say we're anxious. And you can see, like, if we go to bed in this scenario, it's going to be quite unpleasant, because we're definitely not going to sleep because there's no sleep drive, and we're also not going to feel at peace of mind because of the hyperarousal, right? And then we have I'd say most common insomnia scenario, where we haven't slept much, we have some sleep drive, there is gas in the system, if you will, but we're also worried about sleep, we're anxious about sleep, we're scared of not sleeping. So there is this break in our sleep system too. So we have both gas and break, and this leads to kind of like fitful sleep and many other insomnia experiences. And then we have, the yes gas, no break scenario, where our body does need sleep, there is some gas in the sleep system, but our hyperarousal is coming down, we're no longer scared, the fear is fading, and then sleep happens. So this is a nice scenario, and this is where all the education leads. So that was a little review of the gas and brake model, which you'll see that'll come in later. That review was there for a reason. Now, where does hyperarousal come from? Well, when it comes to insomnia, it's really almost always from fear or anxiety, which is a version of fear. But it can be helpful to know that hyperarousal can also happen from excitement. Imagine like a kid before Christmas, they might sleep much because they're hyperaroused because they're so excited, right? Or curiosity, when we're kind of really curious about something, that can keep us hyperaroused too. Anger can as well. Really, any strong emotion can make us hyperaroused. I would say with the exception of sadness. When we're sad, that kind of takes us in the opposite direction. We're like hypo-aroused. We sleep a lot and we don't want to do anything. That's kind of sadness. But really, all the other emotions, including strong happiness, disgust, anger, fear, they all make us more hyper aroused, right? And so here's the thing. When we are quite hyper aroused, either we don't sleep, we are awake, or we think we didn't sleep. We have the experience that we didn't sleep at all, because the hyperarousal is so strong that even a little bit of sleep is not perceived as sleep. Like the brain is just so on the lookout for threats that we don't perceive any sleep whatsoever. So our experience is that we didn't sleep at all. And when we do sleep and we say I didn't sleep at all, we call this paradoxical insomnia or sleep state misperception. And but the point here is really that in this state of like strong hyperarousal, our experience is very clear. There's no debating, no pondering. It's like, I didn't sleep at all. That's our experience, right? So that's hyperarousal and what sleep feels when there's quite a lot of hyperarousal, which now takes us to hypersleep, the topic of the day, hypersleep. And if we go back to the gas and brake model, remember how I talked about like there being, sleep drive is the gas in our sleep system and hyperarousal is the brake in our sleep system. And we can often have both. Well, imagine this. Imagine if the brake really was like pressed, far in. There was a lot of fear and anxiety, a lot of hyperarousal. Now the brake is coming down or coming up, I should say. Now the brake is actually coming up a little bit as the hyperarousal comes down, right? The brake is lifting, the hyperarousal is coming down. There's less of brake action in the sleep system, and there's some sleep dry there. What can happen now is the car can actually move forward. We can actually have the experience of sleep. We sleep, but it's going to be in a fitful way because there is still some hyperarousal, some brake in, mixed in with the sleep state. So when hyperarousal decreases again, we can experience like sleep mixed with hyperarousal, and this is hypersleep. Hypersleep is when we do experience sleep, we do sleep, but we have this kind of hyperarousal sprinkled in with it, mixed in with it. It's like hyperarousal tinged sleep, if you will. And then we have all these common experiences like time skipping ahead. That's kind of paradoxical insomnia baked into hypersleep. Like we think we didn't sleep, but we actually did. But it feels like just time skips ahead. That's a facet of hypersleep. We have this like vivid dreams where we fall asleep and we may have a dream, but then we wake up. We're not even sure if are we conscious? Are we thinking? Are we dreaming? Are we in and out of dreams? But this hyperarousal, it keeps us in a state where we're shifting in and out of sleep a lot, and we remember that, we experience that as vivid dreams, or the time skipping component may be so dominant that we don't have that vivid dreams experience, but it is a common one. And we can also interpret this as like there's no deep sleep. I'm not having any deep sleep because of the hyperarousal. Absence of deep sleep is a common way it's worded. And constant awareness, like that high alertness, it makes us really, really pay attention to everything we hear. And then you're aware of something, you hear something, time actually skips ahead, but you're not aware of that, the fact that time skips ahead. So you think you heard everything in a continuous fashion all night long, right? That's another common one. Now, how about the daytime? Well, interestingly, like hypersleep doesn't predict how we feel during the day. Some people have hypersleep and say, I'm very, very tired and drained, and often attributed to the hypersleep. It's like, I don't get any deep sleep, so I feel really tired and drained. Other people say, like, I have this experience that we call hypersleep. I have this hypersleep experience, but I strangely have a lot of energy. I don't feel tired during the day. So again, this is we talked about this very recently. That's why I'm saying again, our daytime experience really is driven by how we interpret the night rather than what happened at night. So if we have this hypersleep experience and we think this means something is wrong, this means I'm broken, this means I'll never sleep well again, this is really, really not good, then we can have a daytime that is, dominated by anxiety or by that heavy sadness feeling that comes from how we interpreted the night. On the other hand, when we have this like hypersleep experience and we don't interpret it very strongly, there's no strong story around it, but we still have that hyperarousal, then we can feel quite alert, right? So the daytime, the daytime can go either way. Now, what if you had this, like you had this hyperarousal experience and, it's not pleasant. You would like to sleep like before, have this like, a clear sense of like, oh, I really slept. I actually felt sleepy. I fell asleep. I slept. That's our third point here. Like, how does this fade? Well, the first point I want to make actually is this one. If your situation is this one, that you've had this, you've gone from experience unequivocal, like clear-cut wakefulness. You're like, I was like awake all night or most of the night, and I was clearly awake, and then you go into this hypersleep. It's really helpful to know that hypersleep in this scenario is a nice sign. It is a sign that the hyperarousal is going from kind of really intense hyperarousal to a level where it allows you to experience some form of sleep. So it's actually a nice, helpful sign. It's a very, very common step on the path to leaving the struggle with sleep. So that's the first thing I want to know. And the second one is one that you'll be quite familiar with if you follow the channel, and it's this one. When we go through something that is like strange or mysterious and we think it means something is wrong, we automatically become like scared and anxious. On the other hand, when we know that what we go through is not strange or mysterious, when we understand it, we're like, oh, this is hypersleep. I just had some hypersleep. Automatically, the anxiety fades, our interest, our curiosity fades, and then as that hyperarousal fades even further, so does the experience that we call hypersleep. Like everything else, it fades thanks to education, some courage, kindness, doing the hard work that we talk so much about. It leads where we want to be when it comes to hyperarousal, as well as, all other aspects of the struggle. So that is it. That concludes our class on hyperarousal. Let me know, did this resonate with you? Is this something you experienced? Let us know in the comment section. And as always, if you're finding that things are getting easier for you, the hyperarousal is fading, hypersleep is fading, you're arriving where you want to be, that's wonderful. Do share it with us. On the other hand, if things are tricky, you're not quite seeing the big picture, or how you can leave the struggle, or maybe you feel isolated, maybe there aren't people around you that you can share with and talk to who understand you. And if that's the case, do head over to our website, thesleepcoachschool.com. Check out our coaching options. If you join one of our programs, or sign up for a call with any of us, we look forward to seeing you on the other side. With that said, I'll conclude here. Wishing you a nice rest of your Monday, and hope to see you back soon.